So good morning, Wakefield. I hope that things are going very well there. We've just had some very encouraging feedback, and particularly reflecting back on how we offer support alongside challenge. So we're going to be thinking this morning about two new laws which we've talked about on the videos, which some of you have watched this morning and others may have watched beforehand as well. So we're thinking first of all about the law of design, how we maximize growth, and then after coffee we'll be thinking about the law of trade-off and how we give up to grow up. I'm particularly thinking about how we apply both of these things to ourselves and our churches. These are laws of personal growth rather than leadership, but they can apply for us individually and also for us in our churches. So I've had a couple of bits of feedback about my video about how come my garden is so far ahead of the rest of you. It's because I'm so far ahead of the rest of you in all kinds of different ways. Behind me, over the shoulder on the video, there's some trees that we planted a couple of years ago. This is not the tree. This is someone else's tree. And on the video, I talked particularly about the way in which God designs and asked you to, or invited you to look at Genesis chapter 1. In Genesis chapter 1, what we see is the way in which God creates the universe. And there's particularly ingredients that he puts into creation which ensures that life and growth happen. And particularly what we see is let there be light, the separation of land and water, and as a result of the light, there is temperature. And if all of those ingredients are in place and there's a good seed there, the tree has no chance to do anything other than what? I love it when the tech works. So God designs creation with a healthy environment for growth. But if you take away any one of those items, what happens? Let's take the water out. So there is drought. What's going to happen? The tree has no choice. It can do anything but. The tech works even more. It's a slow death. There are sad stories of all of these wonderful schemes about how we are planting new trees to offset our carbon, but we're doing it in such a way that the trees don't actually survive. You know, we need to think very carefully about this in terms of how we create good environments for creation. The point is that all of those things need to be there in the design. You miss one out, it doesn't work. Years ago, I used to work in the motor industry. Let's imagine you design a great engine. One of the things I worked on. You put the pistons there, the spark plugs there, the fuel supply in there. What I worked on was the software which made it work. Take the software out, the engine just sits there. It doesn't know what to do. It's all part of the design. All the ingredients need to be there. And what we see in the way in which God designs is a number of different things. There's making sure that all of the ingredients are there. I had a great cup of coffee this morning because all the ingredients were there. A great cup of coffee with cold water. How is that a great cup of coffee? It's not, is it? You need to have all of the ingredients there. And God designs those in. Another thing that God does, the way in which he designs, it ensures that there is both multiplication and succession. This amazing thing that, you know, every time I cut open a pepper, there's all these seeds inside. I have to kind of, I don't want to eat them, so they end up in the compost. Who knows what happens after that? But God designs all these things with seeds inside. And one of the things that's really important, the things that we design in our own lives and particularly in our church lives, is that we design with succession in mind. We'll think a bit more about that in our next session. As a friend of mine keeps saying to me, there is no success without a successor. If we start something amazing and then we decide to move on, does it all fall apart because we've moved out? Or is there succession, which means that the good stuff carries on? And if it's good in one place, can we multiply it so it happens in other places as well? God designs creation with seeds inside. And God designs with amazing variety and, frankly, excess. You know, excess is one of those things we can have a bit of a strop about, stamp our feet and say, that's a bit excessive, Andy. God designs with amazing excess. Why were there so many seeds in that pepper that I cut open? I mean, frankly, to get one more pepper, surely one seed is enough. But there's hundreds. Why does God do that? And part of the key around variety is that we need that in creation. So when the climate changes, some of that variety will thrive more in the new environment, while others will not thrive as well. And so things continue. As we design things in our churches, are we sufficiently flexible? Or are we just doing one thing? And if that goes wrong, it doesn't work. How many pathways can we offer to people that they can explore faith? Do we want to be in a position where we say, well, our next seeker course will be next January, and now is February, so if you'd like to come back next January, that's when we do it. It's not a very good message, is it? Let's design variety into how people can explore faith, not just one size that fits all. And God designs with time. I'm not a very patient man. That's my family. That's the only one who knows me. Am I a patient man? I'm trying to learn, you know. When I planted this tree, which was over my shoulder on the video, it didn't look very good after a week. Didn't look very good after a month. 3 years on, I'm thinking, that tree's way out of control. It's huge now. Part of design is recognizing that things take time to grow. We aren't born fully grown and mature, are we? As human beings, we take time to grow. Human beings take a very long time to grow to adulthood and maturity. So patience is part of the way in which God designs. We see that in some degree in the rhythm in Genesis 1. Evening came and morning came, another day, which 1 Peter tells us might have been 1,000 years or longer. But also what God's doing in that rhythm is God is looking and saying, oh, that's good. And that's review. And as we design things, let's not just make up our minds, do it. Let's check how things are going. You know, after 6 months, let's ask a question. How's it working out? Is that what we intended? Do we need to do some tweaks just to make sure that it's going to work out really well? And then on day 6, God looks at creation with human beings there and goes, that's really good, very good. So at the end, we can say, yes, that's really good. So Sharon's going to come in a moment and just do a bit more on the law of design. But this is really, it builds on lots of other laws that we've talked about. A lot of this is about environment. It's about intentionality. It's about a process that is not happening in a day. But I hope you can see that having all of the ingredients in place really matters. That thinking about succession and multiplication, how we can make this go further, is part of the way in which God designs. And he doesn't skimp. That variety and excess is part of the way in which God designs. Is that all right? Sharon, over to you.
Thanks, Andy. Fab. Yeah, the law of the design. You might, I don't know, maybe you didn't guess from the video, but this is one of my favourite laws. I'm a little bit big on strategies. One of my favourite stories in the Bible, feeding of the 5,000. You read it in Luke 9. Why is that? Because Jesus said, make them sit down in groups of about 50. And I love organised Jesus. I think Jesus encompasses all kinds of personality types. But I think there is an organised Jesus, a Jesus that had a design and a strategy for his ministry and the things that he was putting in place that I love to look at as I read the Gospels and see the journey that he took over those 3 years of ministry. Do we think Jesus had a design? Did he know where he was going? Did he know how he was going to get there after 3 years? He had a big picture, and then he put stuff in place, not just for those 3 years, but for the succession planning and the legacy as well, getting the apostles alongside him and training them up. Jesus, I think, would have done a really good session on the law of design. But you've not got Jesus, you've got me, and sorry about that. But this is what we're going to look at for the next half an hour or so, the law of design. How many of you think that you live life in the conditional? I should have done more of that. I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I could have done X, Y, and Z. When you read, I don't know if any of you have got the John Maxwell book, but when you read the chapter on the law of design, I was rereading it a couple of weeks ago, and it tells this story where, well, it's his story. John Maxwell says his favourite day of the year is Christmas Day. And I was like, oh, I can relate to that. Love Christmas Day. And then he goes on to say that it's his favourite day because what he does is when sort of the main festivities are over in the day, he goes into his study and shuts the door and gets his diary out for the past year. And he spends the whole week between Christmas Day and New Year going through his diary from the last year, working out these questions. What should he have done more of? And what could he have done less of? What sort of things, which meetings went really well? And who did he have them with? And, you know, which areas of the work were not that fruitful and maybe he shouldn't have done? And I'm not even sure how I would cope with somebody going off to do that between Christmas. Because even though I love the law of design and I love strategies, if my husband did that for that week between Christmas and New Year, I think we'd be entering more into the law of pain. And it wouldn't be good either. But I kind of get it. I get why he does it. Because everything we do requires our time. How are you using your time well? What would it look like for you, maybe just to have a little think for a minute, what would it feel like for you to look back on your past year, on 2023? Would you be able to see those places within your work or your family life or your church life where you think, actually, I really thrived in that environment, that went well, maybe I could do more of that? What would it look like to look back and think, do you know, that just didn't go well. Why did that not go well? I need to reflect on that, think through that. Maybe I need to design something a bit differently, so that might go better if I have to do that again this year. Or even fun things, like I love those people. When they came round for dinner, we had a great evening back in July. Why haven't we done it since? So few of us organise our time well. And I think maybe so few of us as churches organise our time well as well. But sometimes we let life happen to us rather than taking control for those things that help us to grow and flourish and have that sense of abundance and life in all its fullness. So the law of design, to maximize growth, develop strategies. So I asked you in the video to think about who you are, because I think there's a couple of key things that you need to understand about yourself in order to do design well. So did you manage to think about that? What your personalities are like? There's a whole other session on working that out. Come and talk to me if you need to do that. Let's have a hands up. You can do that in Wakefield as well. Who are the optimists in the room? Great. And hands up, all you pessimists? I think as pessimists, we're like, I don't want to put my hand up. It's all right, let's own it, because it will influence how we do things. I think you remember I said in the video that because I'm a bit of a pessimist, I need to make sure when I organise my days and my weeks that I have small wins in them, so that I can go, I did that. Sometimes I write a lot of lists. Sometimes I put things on my list that I know I've already done, then I can cross it off, then I can feel better about myself. Marilyn, are we together on that? I'm glad it's not just me. Who's structured? I'm super structured. Who's unstructured? That's fine. We need all of us. Anybody task-orientated? Where are our people? Lovely. We need you. We need you. Patient? Unpatient? It's just good to know and to be really honest about that, because it will affect these things around designing your life, which is about maximizing your time. I had a day, I said I just needed a day on Thursday when I wasn't here in this building. I've got quite a lot of delivery to write. I can't write when I'm here. This is a busy place, and I knew I needed a day at home. I was like a kid in a sweet box. I was like, I can have a day at home. But I knew that to get the best out of that day at home, I needed to have a plan for it. It wasn't a massively rigid plan, because I knew I also needed to go easy on myself a bit. I had a meeting to fit in. Had an email conversation earlier in the week with a person. If you remember on the video, I said, I'm better if I do reactive things in the morning. The people stuff and answering emails. So I decided that we do morning prayer 9 till 9:30. We did that, and then I booked this meeting in for 9:30. I knew it'd just be half an hour. It was a Zoom, and actually before morning prayer, I did some emails. So I knew that I could go boom, 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 emails, meeting, 9:30 till 10 o'clock, and I knew that I'd be out of the way. I'd feel better, because that's how my brain and my just who I am works. And then I had 2 sort of Bible study things I needed to prepare. It's like, I'm going to get the skeletons of those done in the morning, because again, they give me more life. I like writing those kind of things. And then in the afternoon, I needed to write a talk. And so I needed to read some books and do some study and look at the scriptures and, think more prayerfully, do something that's a little bit more coming out of the middle of you. And I know I'm better at doing that later on in the afternoons. So do you get it? Do you know yourself well enough to be able to organize a day like that? Some of you are shaking your heads. And that's okay. If you're not a very structured person, you might find that, you might listen to me saying that and think you are a nutcase and I want to run out of this room. Because your brain doesn't work like that. But I am task-orientated and structured, but I also know that I'm a pessimist and I'm a bit impatient. And so I've learned how I need to work to get the most out of my time. Even if it feels uncomfortable, it is really worth thinking about clearly. Because otherwise, time just can disappear from us. we're constantly in this life fighting against complexity. Our days are complex. Our families are often complex. Our work life, I think, is probably more complex than maybe it's been in the past. I think our churches are more complex. There's a lot about our lives where we're fighting against complexity. Do you remember in the video I talked about not just understanding yourself, but understanding your values and your priorities? Because if we understand the why we've got some stuff to do, then we're more likely to have the energy to take it on. We need to understand what's underpinning what we do. The why is really, really important. And then we need to understand what it is we've actually got to do. What's the plan? And then we need to work out the how and the when, which is the design and the strategy. So I think for me anyway, and I'd encourage you to do this too, understanding why you want to do something, and then knowing what it is that you've got to do to make that happen, and then work out the how and the when. How are you going to manage some of the decisions and the things that you need to do within your days? And we're going to put this onto church stuff as well in a minute too. So understanding what is it you want to do, what are the values that are underpinning that, the priorities. And then how are you going to put a strategy or a design in place to know how you're going to do it and when you're going to do it and what that's going to look like. So this is one way of trying to look at how we do this well. We need to think about, this is the value, the why thing really. What is the big picture? If there's something in your life, so let's take something, for example, like sleep. Something really, let's just do it as something really innocuous. So the big picture is I'm not sleeping very well. It's affecting how I'm feeling about myself. It's affecting how I'm managing to do my work. So the values and the priorities and the why is I'm just not functioning well because I'm not sleeping. The big picture thing is I need to work out how I'm going to sleep better. So you need to think about with the big picture of the whole thing and what is the end point. Where do you want to be? So it might be I'm going to give myself 6 months to try and work out how I'm going to sleep better. So decide what the time thing is and how are you going to do it. Then once you've done that, think about what priorities, what are your priorities in that? I struggle a bit with priorities because I see everything as an opportunity. Is anybody else like that? I really struggle with priorities because I just, when I've done Belbin, I come out quite strongly as a resource investigator. So I'm always like, oh, that's great. I'll take that. And that's a brilliant idea. I'll have that. And, oh, there's a book I want to read. I'll buy that. And it's on my shelf. And I have all these things that I want to do because I see everything as an opportunity. So it's really important when we're designing and thinking, well, what's the priority? They are all good things. But what's the priority right now that feeds into the big picture? And that might change. You might work on one priority that feeds into the big picture, and that begins to help and shift things and work, and then there might become another priority. Again, I'm thinking of the sleep analogy. It might be that you think, so the priority is I need to shift stuff around in my bedroom. You know, it might be as simple as that. We've got some quite noisy neighbours, so we had to move our bed to a different area of the room. That was a priority. It meant, you know, small thing, but it was a priority. And then you can move on to whatever the next thing is that feeds into the big picture. And then you have to organize. Think, well, how am I going to do this? What do I need to put in place? So it might be, again, if we're thinking about the sleep stuff, it might be maybe you need to download a sleep app, or make a decision. A lot of us make decisions about not having caffeine after a certain time, but it might be you need to buy yourself something else to drink, chamomile or a milky drink, or, you know, I'm doing something fairly basic here, but you get what I mean? You need to organize. What do I need to put in place to make this stuff happen? And then to have an action bias, and say, okay, so what am I going to do to kick this off and start? A sleep app might help that. A lot of people in lockdown did the couch to 5K. Do you remember that? Sometimes you just need something that's got that action bias that gets you going. For other people, you need someone else to do it alongside you. You're not very good at doing stuff on your own, and maybe you've got another friend who's struggling to sleep, and you do it together, and you hold each other accountable. Or someone else to do that couch to 5K with you, because you're not good at doing it on your own. So having an action bias, what is going to get you going on this? How are you going to sort of kick it off? For me, I'm doing stuff with people does actually help me quite a lot. And then measurement. How are you going to evaluate how you're doing? So maybe, again, for the sleep thing, you keep a sleep diary. Diaries are really good for anything. I'm just going to embarrass Adam. We were talking, weren't we, last week about keeping a time diary of how am I using my hours? Am I doing too much? Do I need more time off? How am I going to plan my work and plan my time off better? Actually, physically writing some of this stuff down is really helpful, and then we can measure how well we're doing. A lot of us have these phones that measure how well we're sleeping. Any of you do that? And you look at your sleep score every morning and you think, I don't feel like I got 85 last night. So how are you going to measure? How are you going to evaluate how well you're doing? And then consistency. We've talked a little bit about consistency. A lot of the laws we've done, intentionality and consistency and things, fall into this. Consistency is really about being realistic. So whatever you put in place is realistic and repeatable. I think that's a really good mantra in terms of if you're thinking about strategies and design, either for your life or for your church or your work, or your family, whatever. Is it realistic and is it repeatable? Am I going to be able to do this every day? So Couch to 5K is one of those examples, isn't it, of that app that you start off slowly and it just makes you do a little bit. If you want to run a 5K, you're not going to get up one morning and just do it. So what are you putting in place that's realistic and repeatable? Thinking maybe again about the sleep. Like, I'm really addicted, am I really addicted to my phone? And, do I spend an hour before I go to bed doom scrolling through Instagram stuff or Facebook videos? What's realistic and repeatable? I need to make sure that this goes on sleep. You can program them, can't you? So it shuts down, goes on sleep at, 9:30? Is it realistic and is it repeatable? Don't do something too complicated. My day on Thursday was not too complicated. I didn't give myself hour by hour stuff to do. It's like, I need to do these 2 studies, skeleton of them in the morning. I need to get the base work done for this talk in the afternoon. It was enough. I got that done. I wasn't then beating myself up because I'd not achieved unrealistic targets. Does that make sense? I'm sorry if you feel like you need to run out of the room because you're not a design person. But honestly, try and look at what would it look like to do the John Maxwell and to go over your diary from the last year and really think about, I should have done more of that, or I could have done less of that. And that'll feed into the law of trade-offs that we're going to do in a minute. So we've got about 10 minutes for you to do this, and then we're going to have a break from 11 till 15:15. So Wakefield, I'll just talk through this, and then we'll say goodbye to you, and you can do this on your own on your tables and have your break. But have a think. Choose an area of your life where you desire to improve, or it might be an area of your life where you're experiencing a problem or a blockage. Or it might be an area of your life where you're sensing there's an opportunity. So have a think. Is there an area of your life you want to improve? Is there an area where you're experiencing a problem or a blockage? Or one where you're sensing an opportunity? Let me go, how do I go back? That one that presumably has a back arrow. So once you've chosen an area, have a think about these things. So what's the big picture? What's the priority right now? What do I need to do to organize myself? How am I going to get going? How am I going to measure how well I'm doing? And how, just challenge yourself to think about, is this consistent? Am I going to be able to keep going with this? And how do I do that? Is that okay? Can you do that? I say it might be that you just want to talk about something, or you don't talk about it, do it yourself with a piece of paper. Might be sleep. Some of you might be struggling with sleep. Or it might be something bigger, like, do you know what? I think I want to retire in the next 3 years. Choose which one you're going for. You know, it might be something really big, or it might be something a bit more immediate and simple. Is that okay? Do you want me to put up the other things? So either a place to improve, a place where you've got a problem, a place where you're sensing an opportunity, and then I'll leave that slide up. Think, what's the big picture? Priorities, organize, action, measure, consistency. If you want to talk to people, you can, but I suggest you just have 10 minutes with a piece of paper and try and think through some of this stuff. Okay? Off you go.
Okay, so we're going to look now at the law of trade-offs. You have to give up to grow up. But before we do that, I thought I'd make a little comment about some things that Sharon was saying earlier. If you're looking for somebody who's really, really organised, that's who Sharon is. She's able to put together, as she said, detailed plans about what to do. Now, if Sharon's over there, I'm probably over there. I think if you were looking for an organised person who has a detailed plan for things, then don't look at me. Another thing I wanted to talk about just before we get into the law of trade-offs is you've probably noticed how both Andy and Sharon have referred back to other content in the course. So although Andy was setting the scene for design, he was referring back to the law of the environment. Although Sharon was talking about design, she referred back to the law of awareness. If we know ourselves, we can grow ourselves. Sharon has obviously done a lot on self-awareness. She's aware about her own, who she is, how she operates, so she can incorporate that awareness into designing her own life. Does that make sense? So what I want to encourage you to do is, we've just got one more session after today, but we're really only scratching the surface. You're free to go back through the videos and to look again. In fact, what I would recommend is that you look at the possibility of repeating the course. Now, why do I say that? Well, I've had the blessing of being able to repeat this course for 5 years, actually a bit longer. Okay, and that's been a blessing to me. I would consider myself to be perhaps a bit of a slow learner, so you'll find me taking notes while Sharon and Andy are speaking. Why? Because I've got more to learn on these things. I'm not bored with them, even though, and I think I've said this before, what we're talking about is not rocket science. Personal growth and leadership, the sessions aren't rocket science. What we're actually doing is, through John Maxwell's lens, if you like, is distilling, identifying, naming the principles that cause growth. So those principles come into our conscious mind. We're now conscious that actually the environment and changing my environment really can help me and help my church to grow. We're conscious that self-awareness, know yourself to grow yourself, really will affect the way that I learn because of who I am. Yeah? So each of these laws stand alone in their own right, but they are also interconnected, and we're not covering all of them. Okay? So I would really encourage you to, in this coming month perhaps, to reflect back over what we've been covering since session 1 and refresh yourself. Maximize the impact of the course through a bit of repetition. Okay, over the next 25 minutes or so, I'm hoping that we'll get a clear understanding of what trade-offs are. And because we're more aware, because we understand trade-offs, it comes into our conscious thinking that we can make trade-offs in our daily lives that will enable us to grow. John Maxwell talked about, I think he said he's made 27 major trades in his life. I think last week he turned 76, by the way. And one of the things that he said that really stuck with me was, when you stop trading, really your growth is over. Now, Louise, who's sitting here now, she gave me some just talking to me about some of the things that have happened for her in her journey. And she said, Neville, each year I've tried something new. So 1 year intercessions. The next year, flower arranging. Give me another one, Louise. Because I've forgotten. Looking after children. So this idea of growing, experiencing new things, this sense of movement, and that's a wonderful picture of how we can try new things as well. So one of the things that John Maxwell talks about, which is probably the biggest trade he made, was he gave up 7 average marbles in order to get a super marble, really, really nice marble. And at 5 years old, that was a significant trade. Can you imagine the internal thoughts wrestling with a desire for this super marble and deciding whether 4 marbles for a swap is your limit, or are you going to go for more? And finally, making a decision and getting that treasured marble that you want. You have to give up average marbles, to go up to a super marble. In the video preparation, what I asked was, do you think of some successful trades that you've made in your life? And I hope that you were able to identify some, and I hope if you haven't already that you will identify some by the end of our session today. I've got a Scottish neighbour. He left the armed forces some time ago and moved in with his wife next door to us. And you can imagine leaving the armed forces is quite a big change, isn't it? And he worked hard on a day job, and then part-time he studied for an MBA, a Master's in Business Administration. And then he got a role in an air conditioning company, and he rose up there to sales manager. He got made redundant, and he had to start again. And he did. He worked for a plumber's merchant where he got loads of experience and became a branch manager at that organisation. And from there, he became an academic tutor in a college. So you can see that he designed in and he was willing to trade along the way, trade time. He traded time that he could have put into other things to study for his MBA, and then he was willing to trade along the way. Some were forced trades, so the redundancy is forcing you to trade, and some were chosen trades, the last move he made into the college where he is teaching. I've actually heard a lot of stories, by the way, from people who have been made redundant and how that became a catalyst for change. Doesn't always become a catalyst for change, does it? But it can be a catalyst for change. That's a forced trade. I've got a friend who became a vicar, this is some time ago, and after some years in his first post, he decided it was time to move on, but he felt, as did his wife, that they should take a step down, and he took an associate role in another parish, a long way away from where he originally was. Why? Because he and his wife strongly believed that the trade down was what they needed to do, because his wife had a picture of a big door and a little door at the bottom right-hand corner, and that they should go through the little door. And they went through the little door. And within 3 years, he found himself leading a very large parish. Unexpectedly, that's just how it worked out. And I've spoken to a number of people who've been willing to give up to go up. So they haven't necessarily understood why. They were just being obedient to God in what they did. And they found that that became the doorway to something that they hadn't asked for or imagined. When I came to Bradford many years ago, I came with two options in front of me. One was to accept a place at Bradford University and study engineering and management studies, and the other was to join a charity which is now known as Reach Beyond. I can't say that I was aware that I was making a trade and that I was choosing between different things. I didn't see it as a trade to move up from the south of England to the north, and neither did I see it as a trade-off between the two options that were in front of me. And this is why awareness is important. So when we bring the subject of trade-offs, we now all have a level of understanding of what we mean. We can be more conscious, more intentional in the ways that we trade. We can be more considered. We can put the pluses and minuses, we can write them down, discuss them with friends for those major things that we want to change in our lives. So our awareness of trading means that we don't have to accept the status quo. I think one of the things that is designed into creation, as Andy and Sharon have referred to, is that creation is something that's always changing. There's myriad interactions going on. It's lively, there's life. the status quo, a stuck state, can often mean the opposite, can't it? It can be killing us because we haven't or won't make a trade, or we believe we can't. In the video, I asked you to imagine watching just 1 hour less TV or spending just 1 hour less on social media per week. Let's say that saved 40 hours in a year. That's sufficient to have some great training in pastoral care or pastoral conversations. There was a wonderful pastoral conversations course that took place that Mandy led in Bradford, I think over the last couple of weeks. And I've heard feedback from a person who was on that course that I bumped into, and how transformational that has been for them in their conversations. So just giving up a bit of time to find out what courses could relate to the things that you would like to do, the things you would like to trade, can have a massive impact. They expand you, and then because they expand you, they allow you to contribute more. Our lives become more fulfilling. Jesus did say it's more blessed to give than to receive. And I don't mean, he didn't say there's more blessed to burn out, did he? He said it's more blessed to give than to receive. So trading, I'd really encourage you to sort of think through what it is perhaps that you need to put down so that you can pick up something else. So what holds us back? Well, for me, I think most of what holds me back, I'm talking about me personally now, has been fear. Okay, I'm going to be completely open about that. I think fear has been the biggest thing that's held me back. Fear of what? Fear of failure, fear of what others may think. Anybody identify with these? Fear of losing what's comfortable to pick up something that I don't know. And I take a bit of assurance that I'm not alone. And we can all take reassurance that we're not alone. Apparently, in the Bible, the phrase, "do not be afraid," is written 365 times. Which I think is fantastic. One for every day of the year. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. And one of my favourites is, do not be afraid. Why? Because I am with you. And with God with us, that's actually enough. We need to encourage one another in these things so that we can make those brave, those courageous decisions that we might just put off and put off and put off. From the story of the burning bush, we learn that Moses, he even doubted his own ability, his own value. He feared rejection by his own people. He even doubted his own speech. Moses. Okay? Moses. But with the reassurance of God, the presence of God and the provision of God, he made a trade. So he put down what he was doing in the wilderness with the sheep, and he picked up what God was asking him to do, and that led a group of people out of slavery. God was patient with Moses, and he's patient with us. Without doubt, trade-offs is a key to growth. Without conscious trading, we're waiting for circumstances to act on us. Do you wish that somebody would recognize a particular gift that you think you have or a calling that you think you had? Are you waiting for somebody to come up to you and say, hey? But you have agency. You have agency. You can go and talk to your vicar, your priest, your friend, about the thing that's on your heart and mind. A lot of trades I've made have been unconscious, okay? So I want you to know that. A lot of my trades have been unconscious. And that's okay. We can see that our unconscious trades can be redeemed by God, okay? So Moses, he didn't realize it, but his unconscious trade was to murder somebody and find himself in the wilderness. But God wraps all of that up, all of his experience with the rulers in Egypt, growing up in the royal household, this time alone of reflection and being in a wilderness, he wraps all of that up into his purposes. And that's the God we serve. He can take our unconscious traits, even the ones we may have regretted, and wrap them up into his purposes. But there's more. What if we ask God to stir in us a desire for trades that are going to grow both us and our church? Maybe you have the gift of hospitality or listening or helps. I think somebody mentioned helps earlier. Mandy mentioned helps earlier. What trade could you make to enhance or use that gift more? Maybe a fear is holding you back from having a conversation with somebody else. Take courage. Have the conversation. Good trade-offs create movement. Change happens when we trade, and growth happens. Okay, what we're going to do now, I hope you can read this, and if you can't, maybe you want to go to full screen on that for the guys in Bradford. We're going to spend some time now, I think we've got about 20 minutes, 15 minutes, can't remember, but I'm sure we can work that out. And you're going to have a handout, and the handout is a story from the Bradford newspaper called Telegraph and Argos, and it's about a judge, Jonathan Rose, was in the Telegraph, I think on yesterday. And what I'd like you to do is to go through that sheet, that handout, and to underline anything that strikes you as you read his story in relation to trade-offs that he made, whether conscious or unconscious. You can just scribble on this sheet. You can write, if it provokes something, a thought about another law, just write it down, make it yours, make that sheet yours. And after that, the second thing then is to share what struck you most with the person next to you. Don't do it with each other because it'll take too long, just with the person next to you. Then thirdly, after you've done that, quietly reflect on trade-offs that you have made personally. What trade-offs do you need to make in order to grow further in your God-given potential? What obstacles, what things are getting in the way? Then after you've done that, have a little bit of time, I'm hoping we'll get 4 or 5 minutes, just to pray in pairs for each other about the things that we're discovering. Okay, so we're going over to Bradford now to lead from there, and at the end of the session, you'll get a little handout of a poem which is for you to take and have a read of, which I found very, very encouraging. In fact, I'll read it to you very, very quickly now, and then you can focus on that perhaps a little bit more when you're at home. It's called Making Good Choices After Bad Ones. Though no one can go back and make a brand new start, my friend, anyone can start from now and make a brand new ending. Thank you.
So we thought this morning about these two laws of design and trade-offs. And what I want to do now is just to help think about how we're going to spend the rest of this morning and what we'd like you to do between now and when we meet in March, and what we'll do in that session in March. So when we were thinking about the law of design earlier, we were asking you to apply that particularly to your own life. What we'd like you to be doing from here on is thinking about how you apply that to your church's life. So in the same way as we thought about in our own lives, what might it be that God might want us to focus on, which might be something we want to improve or get past a blockage, or there's a particular opportunity we want to take hold of. Same thing for our church life. Is there something in our church life which is an opportunity for us that we want to take hold of? I'm not going to lead the witness, but I'm going to say to those of us in Bradford, there is a City of Culture thing next year. That's an opportunity. Now, there might be other big opportunities in front of you. That's one of them which is there for us here in Bradford. There might be some blockage or problem, or just you after the conversations that you've had over these past months. I know Fountains, you've done a survey. There's areas to improve out of that survey. That might be a thing that you want to take hold of. So we'd like you in your groups to think about that together, and then to start to think about what might the design looks like. In the same way as Sharon invited us to do that for our own lives, what is it when we apply it to our church life? What's the big picture? What are the priorities? How can we organize? What action is going to happen? In the same way as God looks and reviews, how we measure how we're doing, and how we keep going at it consistently. So those same principles we've used looking at our own lives, how we apply those into our church lives. So therefore, a question which might get us into that is, in light of the course, where are we going as a group? We've done the course together, or as a church in the next year. What's the plan? I say this stuff we've been inviting you to be thinking into over these past months, so this shouldn't be entirely new, but that's what we'd like you to be doing. And we'd like you to start thinking about that and continuing the conversation in the next few minutes before we finish today. But when we come back next time for our final session together, what we want you to do is to bring, however you want to do that, that might be a great big piece of flip chart. That might be a detailed 20-page action plan, though possibly not. Or whatever. Bring something which is then you can explain to a buddy church, what are your plans? What will they achieve? And how might we mess it all up? How can we make sure that we don't do it? What might sabotage that? So 3 things. Your plans, what will they achieve? How can we sabotage it? Now, as you'll be in a buddy pair group, you'll be listening to another church and their thoughts. So as you listen to them next time, these are the questions we're going to have for you who are the church that are listening to another church's plans. What excites you about them? Because there's nothing like mutual enthusiasm. That's really good. In fact, you may want to then go back and revise your own plans in the light of what you heard that they're going to do. Do you have any thoughts or advice for them? And then we're going to ask you to pray for the buddy church. Is that clear? Yes, Andy, that's clear. So I'm just going to put that slide back up, because what we're going to do now, between now and when we kind of just finish up with some prayer at the end, is to, wherever you've got to so far in that process, is to spend some time continuing it. I know that Silsden are mostly at Scargill at the moment, so Greg, you are the one working on this on your own. Sorry about that. But you can start the thinking process and work out what it is you're going to take back to them. So start that process now, and in a little while, Sharon or I will come back up and we will conclude this morning. So also as part of this time, obviously make sure that you know when you're meeting as a group between now and the March meeting, and be ready to come and bring your plans to share with another group when we come back then. Is that all right? Off you go.